system, yeah? Hi, hello to everyone. Thank you very much for joining our masterclass. Today we are going to speak about how to apply the 4 pastry techniques in our recipes. And before that, what I want to do is to explain that today is the 10th anniversary. Exactly today is the 10th anniversary of our school. That I'm so happy about that. And I want to thank you to all my family, my friends, the team involved in all these 10 years, and all the people that joined us, the students, the community that joined us during these 10 years. Amazing path that we did until here, and I hope that will be for 10 or 20 years more that will be here working in order to improve pastry. Let's go to start with the masterclass. Today I'm going to make like 4 steps. I'm going to start explaining a small theoretical part about the pastry techniques. Then I'm going to share with you the video of our promotional video of the B-Concept Extended Online course. I'm going to explain a little bit how it works, this course, and how it will help you in order to improve your pastry life. And during this time, I'm going to prepare everything in my table in order to explain the recipe that I'm going to prepare in front of you, step by step. And I'm going to use that recipe to explain the theoretical part that I'm going to explain right now. And finally, we will have time. If you have any questions, I will answer for sure all the questions that we will have, okay? Let's go to start. I will explain first about the stability in pastry, because this is something that 12 years ago, when I started to realize that I didn't have enough knowledge in order to create my recipes, and my first goal was to understand how we can have recipes that are completely stable. For example, the freezing and thawing process. One of the big problems that I had many years ago was this, that I was just working with freezing and thawing process, and sometimes I had water leaking out of the recipes, and I was thinking, where comes from this problem, And always when I was speaking with my colleagues, all of them, the majority tell me, put more gelatin, and this was the solution. But the solution is not only gelatin. We need to apply another things and check another parameters in the recipe in order to be sure that this recipe will be completely stable for the freezing and thawing process. That means that before to start to do the presentation about pastry techniques that you can see in the screen, I'm going to just share with you in a short moment that the stability in recipes that can be gelate textures, creamy textures, it doesn't matter where we are going to use these creamy textures, in American pastry, in French pastry, innovative products, lactose-free, plant-based, gluten, it doesn't matter, any kind of creamy texture. And then aerated textures that we can use also in many different kinds of pastry. The stability comes from, let's go to say, like 3 directions. One direction is the quantity of dry extract that we have in our recipes. That means that always when we are going to create a recipe, we need to check how much dry extract is going to give us the ingredient to the recipe. For example, if we are going to work with raspberry puree, in raspberry, naturally present, we have fibers, we have sugars, we have some proteins, and all these ingredients are dry extract that they are going to help us to bring stability to the recipe. That means that this part is really important to understand how much dry extract we have in the recipe. Then the second part is how much water, we call this water catchment capacity, how much water these molecules, the proteins, the fibers, the sugars, the fats that we have in the recipe, they are going to catch water. And this is important in order to check, because there is molecules like, for example, proteins or like fibers that they have a really high water catchment capacity. That means that these fibers, for example, or these proteins in general, they give us a lot of stability in the recipe. If we overuse fiber or proteins, also they will bring us problems in the recipe. For example, we will have like chewing gum textures, because at the same time that give stability and catch water, if we overdose this kind of molecules, we will have this problem of elasticity elasticity in our textures. That means that we have to be careful. We have to use the quantity that is necessary in order to build this water catchment capacity that we need in our recipe. And then the other point is the one that we are going to explain today, the 4 basic techniques that are thickening, gelation, emulsion, and aeration that we use in general. All of you, if you are producing pastry, you are using these techniques in order to create the stability in your recipes. For example, when you are using crème anglaise, like the classic, the one that we use in classic French pastry, this crème anglaise works as emulsifier because inside the crème anglaise we have dairy proteins and we have lecithin from the egg yolks that they create an emulsion between fat and water, and this gives us stability for the freezing and thaw process. If we don't have a good emulsion process, this is not going to help us to build the correct stability, and for example, the creaminess of the texture will be not exactly the same. That means that it's important for us when we are going to work and create a new recipe from scratch or formulate a new recipe from scratch, understand these parameters. How much dry extract we have, how is the water catchment capacity of these molecules that I have in the ingredients that I'm using, and what techniques I'm using in the recipes in order to build the texture for sure and the stability. Okay, that means that once we understand this, today we are going to talk only about techniques. We have, like I mentioned, 4 basic techniques. The first technique that we are going to explain today will be the thickening technique. The thickening technique is a technique that allows us to change the mobility of the water. That means that are ingredients that they are going to change the mobility of the water and they are going to increase the viscosity in the recipe. This helps us because all these ingredients that works, like for example, xanthan gum, guar gum, any kind of starch that we are using in a recipe, all these ingredients, what they do is just to absorb water and control this water during the life of the recipe, but for sure in the freezing and thawing process. That means that this technique is going to allow us to control, let's go to say, the free water that we have in the texture. It doesn't matter what kind of textures. We can have like creamy, aerated, compost, in all the sense works in the same direction. Then we have another technique. It's the next technique that will be the gelation. The gelation techniques that here we can see different ingredients like gelatin, pectins, gelan gum, agar-agar, iota, different jelly agents that we can use in pastry. And it doesn't matter what kind of these ingredients we are going to use, all these ingredients, they are going to participate in gelation. What is gelation? Gelation is a process that we work in pastry, that we use in pastry in order to transform water in something that it seems that is solid. Okay, that means that the difference between thickening and gelation is that thickening agents or thickening ingredients, they change the mobility of the water. But when we are using jelly agents, what the jelly agents they are doing in the recipe is to fix this water in order to create something that is like solid. Okay, and for this reason, in the classic recipes like French pastry or American pastry, we have this fixed shape. That this is thanks to the gelatin that we are using in the recipes and also to the fats that we are using, because in general in pastry we use saturated fats that they crystallize and they give us this shape. Let's go to move to the next technique. Okay, the next technique will be the emulsification. What is emulsification? Emulsification is a technique that all of us, we are using always in pastry. It doesn't matter the kind of recipes that we use. When you have egg yolks or dairy products, in general, we are using emulsion process. Sponge, brioche dough, sablé, creamy textures, aerated textures. It doesn't matter. All these recipes in general always they have implement inside emulsion process. And the emulsion process is the technique that allows us to bring together water and fat. When we have thickening, when we have gelation, are 2 techniques that they play only with the water. That means that they catch the water and they give us thickening effect or gelation effect, and they transform the mobility of the water. But the emulsion, what it's doing at the same time that gelation and thickening is working, is just to bring together water and fat that we have in the recipes. And this gives us creaminess, give us, for example, stability for the freezing and thaw process. What's happened, for example, I remember that when I started to create the big concept method 12 years ago, one of my first tests was the lemon cream, classic lemon cream. And classic lemon cream for me is a really awful taste of egg, no? Because we are using a lot of eggs, a lot of egg yolk taste, and this is something that I don't like personally, I don't like. And what I did, one of the first tests, was just to remove the egg yolks and make the recipe with the egg whites, but not with the egg yolks. And I prepared the recipe, I did the emulsion process with the hand blender, and the texture was okay, was nice. We freeze it and thaw, and after this process, there was water leaking out of the recipe, almost a soup. And the problem was in that recipe that there was not enough dry extract and not emulsion capacity, because if we remove egg yolks and dairy products from a recipe, we will have this problem because we are missing emulsion, and we need to add an emulsifier. An emulsifier that can be, for example, lecithin powder will work perfectly in that direction. That means that in order to understand where comes from the stability and in order to avoid this kind of problems, water leaking out, we need to understand the 4 basic techniques. And emulsion is really connected to the stability of our recipes and also about the creaminess, because creaminess in pastry is one of the most important parameters and textures that the people, the customers know, the lovers of pastry, they love to have in our products, okay? Let's go to move to the last part of the pastry techniques, that is aeration. And in aeration, here we have many examples, no? During the history of pastry, we've been using egg whites and whipped cream. This is the most common ways to introduce air inside of the recipes. Egg whites or eggs, even eggs, using different process or proportions of sugar. We've been working with Swiss meringue, with Italian meringue, with French meringue, and this is the classic way to introduce air inside of the recipe. But now, because we have new trends in the market and we need to adapt our products to these trends, we have new ingredients that are coming to introduce the aeration inside of our recipes. And here we can find so many different proteins like soy protein or potato protein that they work in order to create a stable, perfectly stable meringues that we can use in our recipes. And also we have aquafaba that works in that direction. And today for sure we can use albumin, egg white in powder, in order to reconstruct a recipe of meringue, no? For example, to make a raspberry meringue using raspberry puree, using egg white in powder, and then, for example, sugar, and we can have perfectly a meringue with raspberry flavor. That means that all these ingredients, let's go to say new ingredients that came to pastry the last years in order to adapt their recipes to new trends, are also working in this technique that we call aeration technique, okay? Today I'm going to prepare a recipe that is a recipe with nuts, and in that recipe I'm going to explain each of these techniques, how it works in this case in aerated texture. Now we are going to share with you, because we need to prepare the table for the recipe, because I want just to re-explain everything that I explained during these minutes. I want to re-explain I'm going to prepare the nuts recipe, and just we are going to share with you the promotional video of our big concept extended online course, because the next July we are going to make a new edition. Will be, if I'm not mistaken, the 26th or the 27th edition, because we already did a lot of editions and we had more than 1,000 students in our classes, and I want to share with you this video that is a really beautiful and explicative video about this course. Then I'm going to explain a little bit how works this course, and then we are going to prepare the recipe step by step, and At the end, I will answer all the questions that you will put me, okay? See you in a few minutes. Bye-bye. Hi, I'm Jordi Bordas, World Pastry Champion and the creator of the B-Concept method. Together with my team, I have created a unique online pastry course. Everything started when I was 14 years old, working in my parents' bakery. With time, I discovered that pastry was my language, my way to communicate and express myself. With a lot of training and experience under my belt, in 2011, I won the World Pastry Championship. This was a very special moment that became a turning point in my life. After becoming World Pastry Champion, I realized I wasn't free creating my recipes, and I started following a healthy lifestyle. But my recipes did not reflect that. I understood that the world has changed, but pastry remained the same. I started studying each recipe. I needed the freedom to create my recipes, and I needed a method. I spent a lot of time investigating ingredients and techniques, looking for answers to my questions. And this was the beginning of the B-Concept method, a method to create healthier, lighter, and tastier recipes from scratch. In 2015, I opened my pastry school in Viladecans, where we have taught the method to more than 1,000 students. In 2020, we opened our R&D center and created this unique online course. Now you can take this course.
We introduce you to the online extended version of the B-Concept course. In this course, composed of 4 different parts, you will learn how to formulate and create your own pastry recipes. In the first part, you will learn everything about water, fats, proteins, and carbohydrates, the molecules that make up all our ingredients. Knowing their physicochemical and functional properties will give you the knowledge that you need to work with any pastry ingredient. Through the second part, you will be able to master emulsification, aeration, thickening, and gelation, 4 techniques that are essential for creating perfectly balanced pastry textures. In the third part, you will learn how to formulate recipes using the B-Concept method. We will show you over 30 practical cases and give you the keys to create healthier, lighter, and tastier recipes. In the last part, we will show you step by step how to execute a collection of pastry creations. We will give you many practical tips so you can apply them in your daily work. The course includes more than 40 hours of videos, a theory book of over 300 pages, and countless recipes. You will also be able to participate in forums and live webinars to solve all your doubts and interact with other students. You will put your knowledge to test, with different assignments and self-evaluation tests, and by completing them, you will earn your training certificate. But don't worry, we will guide you and help you all along the way.
If you love pastry and want to understand all the processes and reactions behind your recipes, this is the course you have been waiting for.
It is a perfect course for any pastry chef wanting to share their values through their creations.
Maybe you want to redesign and adapt your recipes so that they fit better your customers' needs.
Or you need to balance your recipes, resolving any stability, texture, or taste issues.
And if you are looking for a course to learn how to save time and resources, look no more.
To take the course, you only need a device with internet connection, pen, paper, and a desire to learn.
Throughout this course, we will give you all the tools that you need to become independent at creating your own pastry collection.
Master the B-Concept method and tap into your infinite creative potential.
You will be surprised at what you can achieve once you complete this course.
Come and join us. We are ready to prepare the recipe. Before this, I'm going just to make a small introduction of our B-Concept Extended online course. What is this course? In that course, you are going to learn to create your own recipes, to formulate your own recipes adapted to your needs. In that creation process that we are going to explain to you, we are going to use conventional ingredients or innovative ingredients. That means that we will work with egg yolks, we will work with chocolates, we will work with pralines, and ingredients that helps us, classic ingredients that helps us to build the structure and the textures that we need in pastry. But also we are going to explain innovative ingredients like, for example, fibers, how to use fibers or how to use different emulsifiers in pastry. How it works, that course. This course we've been working during 1 year in order to create all the content that we have inside, and that course starts explaining the molecules. Why we start explaining the molecules? Because in order, for example, to create a recipe and to create a recipe that we need to be stable, for example, for the freezing and thaw process, we not only need to understand ingredients, we need to go a step behind and we need to understand molecules. That means that fats, water, proteins, fibers, sugars, starches that we are going to use, that we are using in pastry, we are going to explain from the beginning. That means that the first module is the one that we are going to explain all these molecules that we need to understand in order to understand the ingredients that we use in pastry. Then the second part of that course, that is the second module, is the module that we are going to explain very deep the techniques that we are using in pastry, the ones that I make the introduction. For example, thickening, gelation, emulsion, aeration will be the techniques that we will explain deep, and we will explain from the view of different, completely different ingredients that they create these effects. No? For example, emulsifiers, we are going to explain many different emulsifiers. Thickening, exactly the same. The capacity to introduce gelation in one recipe, we will explain from different point of view, like for example using pectins, using gelatin, using agar-agar, using iota gel and other kind of gelling agents. And finally, we will explain the same about aeration, know how many different kinds of aerated textures we can create in order to introduce air inside of the recipe. And finally, we will move to the third module, that the third module is the formulation, where you are going to see me and see how I formulate recipes from scratch. And here, what I will do is first, for example, with the B-Concept method, what we do is analyze the main ingredient that we are going to use in the recipe. For example, here we have a gelée texture that we are using mango and passion fruit. And the first point will be understand what these ingredients they are going to bring us to the recipe. Then we need to understand needs. What are our needs? What are our values that we want to bring to our recipes? For example, we need to control the cost. We need to control if this recipe will be lactose-free or, for example, gluten-free or will be plant-based. That means that all these needs will be really necessary in order to create and formulate our recipe from scratch. And then the next step will be to choose the right techniques in each kind of textures, because with this method we can create gelate, compote textures, creamy textures. It doesn't matter in what direction you need, and aerated textures like, for example, mousses or airs, no? Really fluffy textures with air inside. That means that with the method, you are going to learn how to formulate from scratch all these kind of textures in many directions of flavors. We are going to work with nuts, we are going to work with alcohols, we are going to work with dairy products, with egg yolks, we are going to work with acidic fruits, with non-acidic fruits. That means that after the course, you will see pastry in another dimension and in another direction. This is always the students that we have in our school here in Viladecans in Barcelona, in the on-site courses or the online students always tell us that there is experience that completely changed the point of view that we have in pastry doing this course. And this is going to be a process that will be during 14 months that you will have connection in this course. We are going to start implementing the first module, the second module, the third module. At the same time, we are going to share with you so many different recipes and products that we created that you will see implemented the recipe creation of the concept method. And finally, you will have the possibility to make us all the questions that you have around the recipes that you create or the recipes that you are, for example, using right now that, for example, are not stable and you need to stabilize in any direction. We are going to help during all this time, all these 14 months in order to improve your abilities and pastry and give you the keys in order to become completely independent and create your own recipes from scratch. Okay, that means that this is how it works, the course. And please, if you have any questions, just contact us, or you can go directly to the webpage jordibordas.com, and then you have all the information about the B-Concept Online Extended course. Thank you very much for this time. Now I'm going to start with the recipe. Just give me 1 minute because I want to remove the textures that we teach in our course from the table, and we will start with the recipe. During this time, Ramon, that is here with me with the production, we are going to share the recipe of nuts that we are going to prepare right now. That is a praline. That is a recipe, almond praline mousse. Okay, this is a recipe that we created with the B-Concept method. We created from scratch. That means that we start with a white paper creating the recipe, and in that recipe we introduced the 4 techniques that we explained in the previous minutes of this masterclass. I'm going to explain ingredient for ingredient what is the function of the ingredients that we are using in that recipe. The first ingredient that you have in the recipe is water. We can see here the different ingredients. Now we are going to focus with Ramon, and the first ingredient that we have in the recipe is water at 20 degrees. Okay? Why we use water in that recipe? That recipe, the goal was to push the nuts flavor, no? Because in general, it's my opinion, we have like 2 ingredients in pastry that are dairy products and egg yolks that always we are using in general in the recipes. And because the flavor of these ingredients, sometimes in some recipes we don't have a really full, clean taste of the main ingredient that we are using in that recipe. In my goal when I created this recipe was to create a recipe that has almond praline taste, but with a really clean aftertaste, not eggy taste, not dairy taste. Just I want to have like really almond praline clean taste. No? For this reason, what I did was to work with praline that we will explain right now, but the first ingredient that helps us to have clean aftertaste in the recipes is to work in water. We use water in pastry. The only thing is that nobody explains this, but we are using ingredients that, for example, like fruit purees or like dairy products like cream, like milk, like eggs, that they contain water. The only point here is that we are used to understand these ingredients like they are like dairy products or eggs, but we don't understand sometimes that inside of these ingredients there is water that helps us to bring stability, the stability that we need on the recipe. Remember that the first point in order to build a recipe that will be completely stable is to have enough water and enough dry extract in the recipe for have a perfect, for example, thawing process, or in order to have a perfect creaminess. Okay, that means that water helps us to balance the texture and have enough water in order to create the experience that we want. Then the second ingredient is guar gum. What is guar gum? Guar gum is a natural, completely natural fiber that comes from seeds. And this fiber has the capacity to catch a lot of water, no? And this is going to help us to bring stability to the recipe. Here in the recipe we are using only 0.1. This is almost 0%, no? But this 0.1 0.1% that we are using of guar gum, it's really important in order to build thickening effect on the recipe, and this is going to help us in the freezing and thawing process, controlling the water, also thickening, improve the creaminess of the recipe. That means that the creamy experience with less fat will be much better. And then also in that process is important because there is a common process that we do in classic, for example, French pastry, that is in a recipe where we have fruits, we mix fruit puree with gelatin, and we let set the gelatin until the gel starts to appear. And once the gel starts to appear, we break these textures and we mix with the meringue and whipping cream. And here sometimes the problem is that because the gelatin is already in the setting point, we don't have enough time in order to pipe our mousse, and sometimes the mousse gel in the bowl. And this is a process that is not correct. Always we need to have enough time in order to pipe everything and put the inserts, for example, in pastry. And this process that we are using, like classic process, to use gelatin in that direction is a risky process because sometimes we have this problem that sets the texture too fast. The way to solve this is to improve, to increase the viscosity of the emulsion that we are going to create right now. And like that, we can put together the emulsion and the meringue together, and we are not going to lose the air because the function that I explained to you, mixing the gelatin with the fruit puree and let set and then break and mix with the whipping cream and the meringue, this process we are doing since the history of pastry in order to avoid the problem of loose bubbles of air from the cream that we are adding whipping cream and meringue. Other solution that from my point of view is faster and we can work and adjust the recipe much better is to introduce thickening and thickening ingredients like guar gum or xanthan gum or even starch, the classic starch, and like that we are going to increase the viscosity of that part of the recipe, and we will have a perfect final result. Then we have gelatin mass. We already know gelation process. This ingredient, gelatin, is going to help us to set the water that we have in the recipe and create something that it seems solid. Then we have lecithin, is our emulsifier, lecithin, Lecithin is our emulsifier, is the ingredient that comes to substitute, for example, egg yolks and dairy products in that recipe. And for example, if we don't want to use lecithin because comes, for example, from soy lecithin, we have sunflower lecithin, or we have, for example, citrus fiber. In the Sosa company, the name is Naturemol, and this Naturemol has the capacity to emulsify, do exactly the same or similar that is doing lecithin in powder or lecithin from the egg yolks or proteins from the dairy products. And then the next ingredient that we have is our praline. Our praline that we created a praline 80-20, we call this praline. Why? Because I think that you already know that always when we create a recipe, we are focused in order to create recipes that are healthier, lighter, and tastier. And this is our value. It doesn't mean that all the recipes that we need to create with the big-concept method or we are going to create with the big-concept method, it needs to work in that direction. For me, it's really important in order to take care of the people, be careful about the quantity of sugar, for example, or fat that we have in the recipes. And this recipe is an example. What we did here was to reduce dairy products in order to have a clean taste, a pushing flavor of almond praline, and removing these dairy products and egg yolks. At the same time, we are doing, for example, reduction of fats, reduction of cost of the recipe, because dairy products and egg yolks, they have a cost that in that recipe we don't have because we are using a really tiny percentage of emulsifier. And we are working with a really interesting fats that are healthier, that are the unsaturated fats that we have in almond. At the same time, that we are using these ingredients because are healthier, we are using a kind of praline that will reduce the sugar. And this recipe that we call 80-20 because we use 80% of nuts and 20% of sugar. And our philosophy, when it's possible, is to use whole ingredients. That means that the whole ingredients that they have more vitamins, more minerals, for example, like sugar, is more interesting in health parameters for our body. That means that this praline, in that recipe, we created a praline with coconut sugar and almond, using 20% of coconut sugar and 80% of almonds. And what we did just was to, how to say it is in English, recrystallize the sugar. No? We start with water, coconut sugar. Once we have 115 degrees, we add the nuts, and we start to stir, heating until the coconut sugar recrystallize. Once we have the sugar recrystallized, what we do is dry the nuts in the oven with the coconut sugar, and then we blend until we have a really fine texture. And this texture we use in the recipe. Then we have egg whites. Egg whites is the ingredient that is going to give us the capacity to introduce air inside of the recipe, because here we have egg proteins, and these proteins they are going to apply in that direction, aeration process. And then we have powdered albumin in powder. What is powdered albumin? Powdered albumin is just the proteins that we have in the egg whites that we extract the water and we keep just the proteins. And these proteins we add in that meringue because in general here in Spain, in our school, we use pasteurized egg whites, and in general the pasteurized egg whites, the proteins are weak and they have less capacity to introduce air inside of our meringue. For this reason, what we do is just to put more protein to be sure that the meringue is going to work in a perfect direction. Then we have cream of tartar. Why we use cream of tartar? Because cream of tartar, when we have egg whites, the proteins, they will take more time to set. No? In general, we have one problem in our meringues when we whisk the egg whites, and this is a really big problem when we have, for example, fresh egg whites. No? When we have fresh egg whites, we start to whisk, and if we don't use cream of tartar or lemon juice, for example, we have to use acidic ingredient in order to change the pH of the egg whites. No? If we don't add these ingredients, what's happening is that when we are going to stop the machine, these egg whites, they are going to set. And when we are going to add to the recipe, we are going to lose all the air that we introduce it. To avoid this problem, always we need to add, in general, cream of tartar or lemon juice. When we are using, for example, pasteurized egg whites, it's less important. Why? Because the pasteurized egg whites, as I mentioned, are weak, no? And the way that they are going to set when we are going to stop the machine will be, they will take more time. No? That means that working, no, with pasteurized egg whites, we can avoid the use of cream of tartar or lemon juice. We need to make a test in order to be sure that we have enough time for mix both parts of the recipe. But if we see that the meringue set too fast, just add this cream of tartar or lemon juice inside of the recipe, in this part in the meringue, in order to have enough time with your creamy texture in your meringue. No? That means that your meringue will be a really regular and creamy texture, and you can mix with the emulsion part without any problem. Then we have native inulin. What is native inulin? Inulin is a completely natural ingredient that comes from the chicory root. They extract with the same process that we extract the sugar from the beetroot, and they extract the fiber. This fiber is a healthy ingredient because feeds the bacteria that we have in our intestine. And what we are going to do, introducing the inulin in that recipe, is to reduce the quantity of sugar, because the sugar we need to use in pastry for sure, because we need to create a really sweet, balanced sweet textures, because this is what is expecting our customer. But at the same time, we need to just adapt the sweetness to the culture of our customers that we have. This is something that we explain during the concept method in our course of formulation, that we explain how to adjust sweetness in the recipes, because this is something really important for you and for your customers. That means that there is countries, no, for example, or cultures like, for example, Chinese culture, that they don't use too much sugar in their pastry, and it means that the pastry that we are going to create for these customers needs to be reduced in sugar. And then we have countries like, for example, in South America, that they love more sweet, or even in Spain, in the south of Spain, people love the pastry more sweet, and here we need to increase sweetness. This is something, is another topic that we are going to explain during the course, how to adjust the sweetness in the recipe. For this reason, here inulin is helping us in order to create a perfect, stable meringue, but without the introduction of big quantity of sugar, because as you can see here, we have only 3% of sugar. And the sugars that we have in that recipe are from the white one that I'm adding to the recipe, and the coconut sugar that we have in praline. That means that here we are working with 2 sugars, and in total, if I calculate, just give me 1 second that I'm going to calculate, just to understand how much sugar we have here. We have 80% in this praline, that we have 35 per 0.20% of sugar that we have here. That means that here we have 7% in that praline. In that praline, we have 7% of coconut sugar, and then we have 3% of white sugar. That means that in total, in that recipe, we have only 10% of sugar. That is a recipe with reduction of sugar. And then fiber, another point that is interesting, because here we have fiber in the almond, and we have the inulin that we added to the recipe. These 2 fibers, they are going to delay how fast will arrive the glucose that we have in the sugars in our blood. No, that means that this fiber also is really interesting, not only for the building of the stability of the recipe, if not for the health of our customers that they are going to eat that recipe. That's it. We have all the ingredients. Let's go to explain now the process. We will start first whisking the egg whites with the powdered albumin and cream of tartar, and we are going to whisk approximately during 4 or 5 minutes. Once we have like soft peaks, we will add inulin and sugar mixed. It doesn't matter the order, but we need to add all the ingredients. And total, we will have like 10 minutes in total of the whisking process. During that process, I'm going to heat a little bit the bowl, because what we do when we heat, we bring the meringue around 30 degrees, and at this temperature, the egg whites, they are going to develop much better. Then during this time, what I'm going to do is an emulsion. I'm going to melt the gelatin mass until 45 degrees. You have the temperature in each ingredient. As you can see, we have to use in that recipe 70 grams of gelatin mass, that is 6:1. That means it's 6 parts of water, 1 part of gelatin. And then we just let hydrate the gelatin mass in the right direction. We heat at 45 degrees and we mix with the water. That means that in general, when we have time, that is not the case because today we have to finish the masterclass, but when we have time, we mix always the ware gum with the water. We let hydrate if we have time, repeat, like 10-15 minutes in order to be sure that this fiber absorbed perfectly the water that we have, and then we add gelatin mass, lecithin, the praline, and we create the emulsion. But today, as I mentioned, we don't have the time. I'm going to work straight away. I'm going to create the emulsion process, just mixing all the ingredients. Let's go to add the egg whites first, and I'm going to start preparing the meringue. That means that egg whites, egg white powder, albumin, cream of tartar at the beginning, cream of tartar. And we are going to start whisking. In general, always we explain that we need to whisk little by little, and the speed needs to be around the 80% of the machine. I'm going to put in the 4 speed. And as you will see, when we mix the egg whites directly with the egg white powder, we will have like lumps, but this then is going to disappear. You will see that will be completely regular. If we need, we can clean just in 1 minute. We are going to clean the walls in order to be sure that all the protein is completely introduced with the egg whites. And now is the time that I need to heat. Just let me 1 minute, because I need the heating. Li pots fiar a la pam que em porti la... Bé, a la pam que em porti la pistola de calentar. And then for the other side, I'm going to make the emulsion. We are going to wait just 1 minute. No, no hay. ¿Hay alguna allí? Ok, let's go. Pásame... Pásame cuernas, porfa. Cuernas de plástico. I'm going to start with the emulsion. We have the water here that we are going just to mix. And Ramon. Okay, just water. If we have time, guar gum will be the first thing that we are going to add. Fúndeme esto, Pam, porfa. That means that I will blend Okay, that means that if we have time, this 15 minutes just to give the guar gum, santan gum, any kind of thickening agents like fibers that I'm explaining in order to catch the water and to be hydrated. If not, we will go directly. I'm going to add lecithin in the recipe and then praline. It doesn't matter the order of the ingredients. We need just to bring all the ingredients together and emulsify. Then we are going to add gelatin mass, melted, completely melted at 45 degrees. And now we are going to create the emulsion process. We need to use the hand blender, and approximately during 1 minute we are going to emulsify. Here we have the emulsion that is already stable. La cámara de dalt la podem ficar. Just 1 second that we are going to put the top camera. That means that... Quin aquest? No, però no vaig a barrejar ara. Okay, as you can see here we have already the thickening effect. This thickening effect comes the thickening effect that we have here comes from the wargam for sure that we have as a thickening ingredient, but also the praline is working as a thickening, let's go to say thickening part of the recipe. Why? Because nuts, they have proteins, they have fibers. These proteins and fibers, they catch the water and change the mobility of the water. That means that for one side here we have the thickening technique by using wargam, but for the other side we are using we are using a praline that give us thickening effect in the recipe. And in this meringue now I'm going to show you, because this is important to see, that we are going to mix sugar and inulin, but I will put in the center. That means that in general I stop the machine, I add inulin, sugar. And why I do like that? Because I try to avoid lumps. This is a common problem that we have when we work with fibers, that if we put in the machine like that, the classic way, sometimes the fiber stick in the walls and also in the bottom of the wall, and then we can have like a small lumps. In order to avoid this problem, just stop the machine, and you can see that the meringue is completely flexible. The texture is amazing because we are using cream of tartar in the recipe. If you don't want to use cream of tartar, lemon juice is another option. Okay, and here we have to be sure that the whisk that we are using in the machine is not in contact, but almost in contact with the bowl, because like that we are sure that inulin is not going to place on the bottom part of the bowl. Okay, let's go to weight. In order to be sure that we don't have lumps, I'm going to just clean perfectly the walls. Okay, and let's go to finish the process. One minute that I'm going to clean the table. I'm going to remove the emulsifier. Las preguntas son las que ve aquí Ramón a la pantalla. Ya está, fica el so, Ramon. We just stop now. Ahora está funcionando. Just stop the sound because we were moving things and the machine is doing a lot of noise. I'm going just because as you can see the meringue is already almost ready. Tenim la càmera de dalt, Ramon, perquè faré la barreja aquesta. Vale. You can see that the texture is already nice, no? In here. The texture of our meringue is really fluffy, but at the same time has a structure. Is a good meringue in order to mix, and we can see that the sugar and the inulin is completely dissolved. That means that this is the point where we are going to use the meringue in our recipe. How to mix? Classic way is with the plastic spatula and go little by little and mixing process. In general, for the way that we formulate the recipes, we can mix directly on the machine. That means that I'm going to do is just to reduce the speed, and I'm going, because here the thickening process is already balanced, and we are going to mix little by little with the machine both parts of the recipe. Okay, and you will see that we will have like a perfect stable texture at the end. I will finish by hand. And this, for example, for big productions is really interesting because we can mix with a machine. There is no problem, and we are just add the emulsion little by little, and then we are going to finalize with the spatula or with the whisk. It doesn't matter. One direction or the other direction, up to you. In general, what I do, I start with the whisk in order to go faster, and like that I move more part of the recipe. And then in order to be sure that the walls are completely clean, what I do is just to turn a little bit with the spatula, just from the center to me, and at the same time, I'm just turning the ball, okay? And that's it. Here we have a perfect and nice, super nice and shiny texture, emulsion, gelation, thickening, aeration, and as you can see, it's completely stable because on the top we don't have bubbles of air. In general, when we don't have enough thickening effect in our recipe, the problem is once we mix the whipping cream and the meringue, or the meringue, we have the problem that we are going to see a lot of bubbles of air in top, and this is because the thickening process in the recipe was not perfectly balanced, okay? And now, in general, what we do is just to freeze and thaw. We take a part of the recipe, and we are going to use this silicone mold from one of our partners, Silicomar, in order to just move to the freezer, freeze, thaw, and see the texture, because this is something that we explained during the class, okay? We formulate the recipe, we adjust, but we need to make a test, no? And we need to prepare the recipe, freeze, thaw, and then adjust, because in general we need like 2 steps. Creation of the recipe, prepare the recipe, and then adjust the final recipe until we have a perfect gel process, thickening process, in this case aeration, because we introduced air inside of the recipe, and emulsion. Okay, that's it. I think that this, I hope that this information was really interesting for you. I'm going to answer because I see a few questions from Sneha. Thank you very much for your questions. In this 14-month course conducted on campus, yes, for sure. You have a campus that you can text us every day. You can make questions about the lessons that you are following in the class, and any kind of questions that you have. This is something that always I tell to the students and all our followers like you. Always when you send emails here, we try to answer to everybody. But for sure, when you are in the online extended the concept course of formulation recipes from scratch, here every day we answer the questions. It's only in the moments that we have holidays, because for example, last week was the Easter holidays. During 1 week we didn't answer questions, but Monday when we arrived, we just answered all the questions that there was from our students. It's the only moment that we interrupt a little bit the answers about all your questions, but every day you can ask without any problem. And we are here to help you. For sure, this is a course, it's a really serious program, and we want to help you to improve your skills and to understand what you are doing in pastry and become completely independent. That is the focus of our course. Though the second question, do international students get opportunity to work as apprentice or employee after the course, and how much focus is there in creation industry connections during the course? This is not our focus. This is a focus related to increase the skills in order to formulate your own recipes adapted to you and to your market. That I think that this is something really important for us, and is a really unique course that exists in our world. And this kind of opportunities, we just don't have the capacity, because we are a small team, we are around 10 people, and we don't have the capacity to connect in all these directions. But for sure, if we can help you in that direction, we will try to help you as much as possible. Okay? There is, what is the texture decided for the egg whites? Angela, thank you very much for the question. I'm not sure what was your question. What is the texture? Just let me check the traduction. 1 second, because this word I don't know this word in English. Sorry for my English. ¿Cómo?
Considerar. ¿Cuál es la textura que hay que considerar?
Okay. What is the texture that we need to have in the egg whites? The one that you saw, we need to avoid the over-whisking process. That means that in general, if we work like a standing machine like that during 10 minutes at around 80% of the speed, between 50 to 80% of the speed of the machine is more than enough in order to whisk egg whites. Then for the plant-based proteins is another direction. No? For example, for the plant-based proteins that we explain in our courses, no? Because you have 2 courses, plant-based courses online, small courses that you have in our website. In that courses, we explain that this kind of proteins, like soy protein, potato protein, needs around 16-20 minutes of whisking process in high speed. In egg whites, it's different. In egg whites, we need to reduce the speed. We need to have like around 10 minutes in total, 4-5 minutes without just no sugar or not fibers or not sugars in general. And when we develop the egg whites with the egg white powder and cream of tartar, that as I show you, you have like soft peaks, you add the inulin sugar or sugars that you are using in your recipe, and then 4-5 minutes more until you have a really whipped texture, but at the same time fluffy, not overset, not over whipped texture. And this is really important in order to have a perfect creaminess after the defreezing process. Okay. Thank you. Why did we not mix meringue with emulsion traditionally by folding? You can do it, but for me it's faster to mix directly with a machine. No? In the classic process, what we do is working with a spatula, plastic spatula, and we go little by little, little by little. This is classic recipes with conventional ingredients and conventional, balanced and formulated, no? Like 50 years ago, today we just been working in order not only to teach you to formulate your recipes from scratch, also we explain how to improve the process and how to reduce, for example, the time that we use in the production of the recipes, because time, as you know, is money, and this is something really important also in pastry. If you are going to open your own business, this is something that we need to take care, and we need to try to find what we want in texture, but the faster possible that it is, no? And for example, for me, to prepare Italian meringue today is really a wrong way to work, because Italian meringue has a lot of sugar. We are mixing egg whites with a syrup. In the past, because we were thinking that this was like pasteurization process, but it's not like that, because we don't achieve like 84 degrees. That means that it doesn't make sense in that direction. The only thing is that Italian meringue is interesting because when we are going to mix the syrup, we are going to heat the egg whites around 70 degrees, and here we have like gelation process, and this give a little bit of stability in the recipe. But as you saw, we never use Italian meringue for this reason, because the process is too long. We have too much sugar inside of the recipe, and to work directly with egg whites and sugar, or with inulin, or mix with sugars is much faster, and then mix with the machine is much faster, and the balance of the texture is amazing. Just if you have time, I recommend to you to try this recipe. If you have any questions, just text us. Jordi, I did the recipe, but I have this problem with the recipe, or for example, I cannot find this ingredient. What ingredient I can substitute? Just email us to info@jordibordas.com, and we will help you in the same direction that for sure we help all the students in our courses. Okay, that means that you can contact us always when you have questions. Thank you very much for the masterclass. What device did you use? Warm up. Yes, this is, thank you, Katia. This is just a heating gun. It's a really cheap tool that you can buy in some shops. For example, they use for remove paint from the walls. They use this, and it's really cheap. It's around 20 euros, for example, and it heats. No, that means that we have air around 60 degrees. And what we do is just warm up a little bit the bowl in order to improve the ability of the proteins to introduce air inside. No, that means that the meringue like that is much more stable, and the texture, as I hope that you saw, was really creamy, balanced, and shiny final texture. Okay. Do you have any questions? If we change the cream of tartar with lemon juice, how much juice? I recommend to you to put 5% of the egg white that you have in that recipe. Just let me check the recipe. In here in this egg white you have 16%, 10% will be 1.6, around 0.8%, 0.8 of lemon juice. Okay, more or less. It doesn't matter if you put a little bit less or a little bit more. It will help you to reduce the pH of your egg whites, and like that your meringue will be completely creamy texture than the one that we prepared that was really beautiful. Okay, I think that we don't have no more questions. Okay, perfect. Thank you very much to all of you. Thank you for joining the masterclass. If you want, just join us in YouTube channel. You can subscribe, and like that you will receive all our master classes that we are going to do in the next month. We are preparing 2 really interesting master classes. We are going to explain in the next one the creaminess in creamy textures when we have grainy, how to solve these problems. And then the other master class that we are going to prepare also is about the stability. We are going to speak about the stability and how to avoid, for example, synergy uses in our recipes. Thank you very much for your time. We keep in contact. Anything that you need, just contact us, please, to info@jordibordas.com. And remember that next July we are going to start with the editions 26 and 27 of the Big Concept Extended course, where you are going to learn to formulate your own recipes adapted to your needs. See you. Thank you very much. See you soon, and have a lovely day. Bye-bye. See you.